everyone, I'm Betsy.
And I'm Greg.
And we want to invite you to check out our podcast, Going on 30.
Each month, Betsy and I take a look back at a movie that was released 30 years ago that was either nominated or should have been nominated for Best Picture.
We talk about the legacy of the film, choose the best scenes and performances, and explore our own hot takes about the movie.
And we discuss the greatness of Tom Cruise, an actor who has graced our screens for multiple decades, taking on some of the most artistically challenging pursuits while displaying what can only be described as an everyman relatability. An actor, nay, a thespian, who pushes the boundaries of what the medium is capable of while revealing the humanity that's underlying.
All right, I'm done. I cannot tolerate this anymore. So listen to Going on 30 every month right here on the Popping Collars feed, wherever you get your podcasts.
I love you, Tom!
Oh, jeez.
I'm a podcaster.
What on earth is that?
I'm sorry. I'm not laughing at you. You just reminded me of my mom.
Wally, what are you doing?
She's the worst. You're fantastic. A podcast is kind of like it's like a radio show that's not on the radio. It's on the internet. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That's also like my mom. It makes it sound more confusing, doesn't it? It sounds like this.
Dear Slim, I wrote you, but you still ain't calling. I left my cell, my pager, and my home phone at the bottom. I sent 2 letters back in autumn. You must not have got them.
Welcome to Popping Collars, the podcast that lives at the intersection of religion and pop culture, the longest running Episcopal podcast on the planet Earth. I'm your host. My name is Greg Knight. I am the associate for Christian formation at the Church of Bethesda by the Sea in Palm Beach, Florida. With me are my co-hosts. Here's how we're doing it this time. From the birthplace of Dermot Mulroney and Mackenzie Phillips, it's Betsy Carmody. Betsy, welcome to the show.
Whoa.
What?
Big shoes to fill.
Dermot Mulroney and Mackenzie.
I haven't thought about
Phillips?
Mackenzie Phillips in years. My goodness.
Yes, hi, I'm Betsy Carmody. I serve here. I don't think they were born at Episcopal High School in Alexandria, Virginia, but that is where I serve as head chaplain. And we are in winter trying to keep it up. It's the longest, February coming up is the longest 3 months of the year at boarding school. It's very tough.
Did Mackenzie Phillips die?
What?
She's done many things
She survived
to her body.
overdoses.
Yes,
I think she's okay.
Oh,
I think
good.
she's okay.
I liked her.
Well,
Okay.
I love One Day at a Time. That's one of my favorite shows.
From the birthplace of Olivia de Havilland and John Steinbeck, it's Ricardo Avila. Ricardo,
Yeah.
Wow.
welcome to the show.
Thank you, Greg. John Steinbeck was born down here? Over
What,
here?
according to the internets,
Do they say specifically Los Gatos or
it said Los Gatos. Yeah,
John Steinbeck was born in Los Gatos?
what it
There's
says. That's
there's
what I'm
nothing-
reading on the internet, and the internet never lies.
No. There is a John Steinbeck house in Salinas, California, 1 block away from the diocesan offices.
I've been there.
To the
I stayed at the Quality Inn just up the street.
Oh,
Oh.
if you have to say quality in the title.
Hey, I'm a Choice Rewards Gold member, okay?
My name is Ricardo Avila, and I am from the birthplace of John Steinbeck and Olivia de Havilland, who I think is still alive. Olivia de Havilland? She's like 117 or something.
So
Los Gatos, California. I am the rector of St. Luke's Episcopal Church there in Los Gatos. As of this recording, we have.
she died in 2020. Sorry, died in 2020 in Paris.
Yeah, I was about to say. I think it was recent. Yeah.
Yeah, very recent. Sorry.
No, that's all right. Now I'm thinking about her. She lived around Carmel. You know, when you go to Carmel, you get like the big Carmel fat magazine with like 100 pages of ads and like 8 pages of articles. And she was in that, and she was really gracious and lovely.
Yeah.
So where were we? My name is Ricardo Avila. I am the rector of St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Los Gatos, California, birthplace of John Steinbeck and the late Olivia de Havilland. I might be going to the Holy Land this year, which be the first time. It's come up quite suddenly, and so I'm sort of, I don't know, not trusting it or something. I'm not registering yet because I'm nervous, but it could happen in late May and June. So we shall see. I'll keep you posted. And
What kind of trip is it?
Well, there's a fellow who is the canon or a former canon precentor at Grace Cathedral, and he's been leading these kind of pilgrimages to the Holy Land for almost 20 years. And he has some really strong connections with Palestinian Christians there, including, I think, an Anglican priest. And so they've led folks, but it's a whirlwind. It's like 4 nights in Israel, staying at St. George's house, part of that the cathedral there. And then we're going up to Nazareth for 3 nights and staying with some nuns, and then back for another 3 nights in Jerusalem via Bethlehem, Jericho, other kinds of things. But it's all in like 10 days. So we'll see, but it'll be my first time. I'm picturing it as an overture to the Holy Land. And then I go back and kind of see with more depth, hopefully. So yeah, that's my news.
Awesome. I love that we have this podcast where the phrase "I'll be staying with some nuns" doesn't sound weird, you know? Like, where else in life would that?
Just a few nuns is fine. Yeah, good time.
Yeah, play poker.
And from the birthplace, oh my gosh, I have a giant list to pick from.
We've got some good ones.
I know. Here's what I'll give you. You ready? From the birthplace of Malcolm X and Marlon Brando. How about that? It's Liz Easton.
I love it.
Wow.
Thank you. I thought you were going to say Johnny Carson, who actually, no, Johnny Carson was born in Norfolk, Nebraska. Excuse me.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you, Greg. My name is Liz Easton. I'm the canon to the ordinary in the Diocese of Nebraska. We were supposed to have a huge winter storm today. They closed schools. They closed everything, like preemptively. And then it just never came. It was so disappointing. We got like a little dusting of snow, and it just never quite got cold enough. So I was kind of looking forward to one of those big snow days that are so cozy and beautiful, and that you worry about tomorrow, you know, but during the time of, you just enjoy the snow globiness of it all. But we didn't really get that. So I don't know what's going to happen.
I have 2 things to say. Wait, I know this is early. I just looked up Mackenzie Phillips because I kind of didn't believe you that she was still alive. Well, she is still alive. And then the other thing is, Greg, what about you and where you're from and who's born from there?
Yeah, who's born
I didn't even look.
Bethesda by the sea in Palm Beach, Florida.
Dude, I didn't even look. Let's see. Birthplace.
Should we guess?
Okay. Famous people from Palm Beach, Florida. Ellen Barkin, George Hamilton.
Okay.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I think I win. I think I win with Malcolm X and Marlon Brando.
Totally.
Today, we're talking about pop culture fandom. What does that mean? Well, Webster's defines fandom as... Okay, hang on. I cracked myself up.
I don't
there.
let students do this in chapel talks. I don't allow this here.
I love this.
Yeah.
This is like the dumbest intro ever.
You have to say it with a straight face, like Webster's dictionary defines fandom as blah, 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 blah.
That's right. Today we're talking about pop culture fandom. What does that mean? Well, Webster's defines fandom as the state or attitude of being a fan. Yeah.
That's a terrible definition.
That's how you define a word with a word. That's not a very helpful definition. So let me see if I can do better. If you've ever heard of Swifties or the Bay Hive or Trekkies or Bronies or anything else that identifies a group of people by what they like, then you've heard about the world of fandom. Sometimes it's cute. Sometimes it's incredibly nerdy, and sometimes it's problematic. Where will each of us land on that spectrum? Let's find out as we go to the bag. Oh, I looked in the bag. I probably shouldn't have done that. I feel like that could affect the outcome. It is an R for Ricardo.
Yay!
I never get to go first. All right. Well, I'm about as ready as I'll ever be, so I will just go on in. Now, I'm pretty sure no one else has chosen this this particular fandom subculture, and And Greg, thank you for suggesting it. But indeed, my fandom pick is Charles Dickens fans. Lo and behold. And to be more specific, a certain event that happens in late July every summer called the Dickens Universe on the UC Santa Cruz campus, which I attended faithfully probably for 9 years or so. You know, there's no way to describe it without sounding like a total geek. So I'll just go on ahead and tell you what it is. So first of all, I was lured into this subculture by William, my husband, who is an avid Dickens reader. 30 plus years ago, some professors of English at UC Santa Cruz, one of whom is named John Jordan and another one named Murray Baumgartner, they decided to have a little get together about Charles Dickens. And from there was the seed for this thing that's now this amazing week in the summer. So you've probably never been to the UC Santa Cruz campus. UC Santa Cruz, it's on this beautiful mountain. It's got redwoods everywhere. They're known for their kind of ecological majors and things like that. But it's a gorgeous campus. And what you do is for a week, you go and you stay in the dormitories and you eat in the cafeteria. And you have discussions on Charles Dickens. They choose a different book every year. And it's different levels of people. So there are like professors from around the world. And then there are grad students who are like, the grad students are their own thing. They stay out drinking late in someone's room and they're partying. Then they get up and they lead a discussion or something. And they're always the cool kids. And they're, in their 20s and 30s. And then there are teachers, high school teachers and such. And then there are just the rest of us who just love going. And there are a few high schoolers as well. So basically, I'm not telling this very exciting. It's a very exciting thing, but I'm not describing it well. It's a cross.
Are there costumes?
Yes, there is. At the very end, there is a ball.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay. I'm excited about that.
Okay. Maybe I should just get to that part. So here's the thing.
No.
The Dickens universe is a cross between summer camp and book club. That's really what it is. So you go and you stay in the redwoods and dorms with people who have gone every single year for 33 years. And no matter what the book, and then people who are coming for the first time, and it's beautiful and relaxing, and you have conversations over breakfast. You're arguing, the days are very full. You get up, you have breakfast, and then you go to a lecture or a discussion group led by a professor. And then there's a lecture at about 9:30 in the morning. You have coffee and you sit in this big hall. And then you have your grad student-led discussion, which to my mind is the best part of the week, because you can actually discuss certain things like, why did Dombey treat his daughter that way? Or, was Martin Chuzzlewit really thinking that he was going to conquer America when, all these things, David Copperfield, who did he really love? Who's the biggest villain? So everyone's discussing the book. They're discussing it at lunch, at dinner, on walks through the redwoods. And then there's an afternoon lecture. There's afternoon tea with china fancy china, and the ladies make little cakes and things. And then you have an evening discussion and dinner. There's postprandial potations. So you have drinks after dinner. It's a whole thing. And they show a movie. There's usually a BBC version of the movie. You're all smiling.
I love it. I love it.
I'm just enjoying the total nerd out.
I love anything where like scholars and fans.
Yes.
Like academic scholars and armchair scholars get to come together and just share their love of something. I think that's so cool.
Exactly. There are these kind of silent auctions of different things. You can buy books. The guy comes with his antique bookstore and other stuff. But they show movies. So there's a BBC adaptation of every Dickens novel, basically. And they'll show it in installments in the evenings and in the afternoon. And you go and you watch. And it ends at 11 at night. And you go on the dark campus back to your dorm room. I mean, it's kind of heaven on earth. Everybody's super nice. And then on Thursdays, there is a play. At least the last 7-8 years there has been. And I've been involved in the plays. I've been Mr. Dombey in Dombey and Son. And so there are musical numbers. You got to dress up somehow, however you want. I've worn top hats and things. and it's hilarious. I mean, it's kind of hard to describe because it is really geeky. Like the jokes come from inside stuff about Dickens and stuff like that. And then we have a huge party afterwards where people have made these delicious, like lavender lemon poppy seed cake, like the sort of thing that you wouldn't like find in a regular place, but it's just beautiful, fancy, old fashioned stuff. And then Friday, yes, there is a ball. They hire out a band that plays old English reels, and they teach you how to do the old timey dances. And there are women who wear like super big ball gowns and and men with top hats and tails. And it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, I wear shorts and a t-shirt, frankly. I can't pull it off, but they love it.
That's not true. You could pull it off. I don't believe you.
That's true.
Yeah,
I could pull it off.
It gets you in a waistcoat. We could do this.
I think one of the really cool things about this experience too is how, everyone here shares a love for reading and for literature, and whether you specialize in 19th century British literature, American literature. It's really great to meet other people that are also nerdy and love to read. Just delve into all aspects of it because you can get something from every little event that goes on here. We're grateful to have this opportunity to come to Dickens Universe. It's an enriching experience. Most definitely. I think we're both super thankful and grateful for this experience.
The Dickens universe, it really is pretty magical. This summer's is July 23rd to the 29th, and they're focusing on A Tale of Two Cities. And then the other thing I would say is probably true of a lot of fandom. It gives you a sense that you belong to something. People become friends for years through this. There are Dickens communities around the world that meet in small groups locally, and they'll go through a book together and discuss it.
I have two things. One is that this reminds me, I recently rewatched the Gilmore Girls. And have you watched that, Ricardo?
No.
Okay. So one of the characters owns a bed and breakfast in a New England town. And at one point they host the Poe Society. And it's hilarious. It's like exactly what you're describing, but for Edgar Allan Poe. And they're like these dueling Poes who are like in full character. They do dramatic readings of The Raven, and it's just very funny. So it reminded me of that. And then here in Nebraska, we have the Willa Cather Foundation's Cather Spring Conference, which is very similar. I don't think they dress up, but it's the same deal. It's like readers and scholars together in community, enjoying the town of Red Cloud, Nebraska, where Willa Cather grew up. And we have a little church. It's actually a deconsecrated church where she was baptized. And every year we do a service there for the Cather Conference. And it's just really fun. So Those are my two things. Yeah.
It's a wonderful thing, the Dickens universe. I'm not going this year, partly because of the Holy Land possible trip I'll be taking. But that's what I've got to say. God goodness, I could go on forever. I did.
You're a true fan. Do you guys have a name like Dickensians or something?
We don't. I was trying to think of something to just say that was pithy, but no, just Dickens lovers. The thing is, you were talking about your Poe conference on that TV show. There's apparently a Jane Austen society as well. And the Dickens people I know, like, I go to the Jane Austen society too. They'll be like, what is that? 5 novels?
Wow.
They're all down on Jane Austen, right?
That's
whatever.
funny.
What do you talk about? But Dickens has 15 novels, one of which is unfinished, and he's got Christmas stuff, and there's all kind. And then sometimes they'll pair it with other writings of the time. So
our next offering will come from Liz.
Oops.
All right. I'm afraid that Betsy and I maybe picked the same one, but I know that Betsy can definitely contribute to mine.
Okay.
And in the interest of like vulnerability and full disclosure on the pod, this is like a fandom that I'm like actively struggling with engaging. And it's not a super defined fandom, but I'm talking about all of the true crime media and the communities that gather around it, which has always existed. I mean, seriously, since the beginning of time, people have been interested in crimes and violent crimes. But in the last few years, there's just been like a huge uptick, which we've all seen on Netflix and cable television, but then especially in podcasts. So the fandom term that I would use would be the term that's used to describe fans of the podcast My Favorite Murder, which is murderinos.
Oh.
And so My Favorite Murder is a true crime comedy podcast, which has probably been on since like 2015 or 16. And the premise of the show is that two comedians who are also friends with each other banter for a while, and then they each tell a true crime story. And
I don't know whether Georgia would consider herself a comedian, but
well, yes. I think that maybe that now she is.
Maybe she is now. Okay.
I mean, she doesn't do stand up, so it's Georgia Hardstark and Karen Kilgariff, and Karen Kilgariff is like a veteran stand up comedian and also a comedy writer. And Georgia Hardstark had a career on the Cooking Channel.
Yes.
Yeah. And then did some like sketch comedy and stuff. But they are two women who found when they met each other at a party once that they were both interested in true crime. And it was like sharing a secret, like dirty little secret, like, oh my God, you like that? I like that too. And what they discovered was that lots and lots of people, particularly women, like this. Probably the true crime podcast that started it all, that we're all probably most familiar with, is Serial, which came out by NPR's podcast studio years ago. And that kind of started the beginning of this obsession. So I guess I sort of struggle with this because the truth is that I really love My Favorite Murder as entertainment. Like, I think it's funny. And the first part of the podcast is totally just the banter of two friends, which I find comforting. And then I find the stories that they tell interesting. So that's sort of like one aspect of this for me, of this fandom, is just liking the podcast. But the other is all of the energy around true crime stories that feels both like interesting and compelling to me, but also definitely problematic. And you can list all of the reasons why true crime media can be problematic. It often centers the stories of white people. It often centers the stories of middle class and upper middle class people. It's violent. And there is probably a minority contingency of people who follow this media who almost are like parasocial fans of the criminals, not of the victims. So like we saw this with Netflix's Dahmer this year, especially among really young people, like teenagers, because they cast this kind of sexy actor to play the super disturbing person. There was almost like a fandom around Dahmer, Jeffrey Dahmer, which feels very problematic itself. So I've always been interested in crime stories, I think, in the way that a lot of people are. Like, a crime is a cataclysmic event in a person's life, in the life of a family and a community. And the stories that are told around that can be really rich, honestly. And I'm sort of interested in like catching the bad guy, like that, everything that goes into that, escaping the bad guy. I'm not so much interested in the bad guy himself as much as like the tension and like the thriller aspect around it. But I also know, and I think of this specifically as a Christian, like when I'm really trying to be a better follower of Jesus and a better person, I am aware that the things that I consume, bring into my life and my spirit and my body are much more than like the food that you eat or what you drink. Like, when I'm really feeling healthy, like I'm conscious of like what I'm eating and drinking and stuff, what I'm bringing into myself that way. When it comes to the media that I consume, I'm not always that careful. And sometimes it does feel dark and a little gross to be essentially finding entertainment in the tragedies of other people, the worst things that they've ever experienced. And when it comes to the media telling of these stories, very often the families of survivors are not consulted in the telling of these stories. So like the families of the survivors of Jeffrey Dahmer, who were primarily young Black gay men, no one consulted with them. They just turned on the TV one day or opened up the newspaper and saw that the most horrifying thing that had ever happened in their life was being turned for entertainment and profit for other people, and that they were not even consulted about how to tell their stories or whether to tell their stories. And that to me feels really bad. Like that is not good. I can't imagine being in that circumstance. With My Favorite Murder, they have faced a lot of criticism over the years, which I think that they've responded to pretty graciously. Like if you listen to the whole podcast, you hear these people really growing and developing as like people and as storytellers.
I agree with that.
I love it. And one of the things that they actually are good at doing, because a comedy true crime podcast just sounds so gross. Now, they weren't so much at the beginning, but now they are like super adept. I mean, really sophisticated at telling jokes and being funny at the expense of like the dirt bag in the story and honoring the dignity of the victims. It's actually pretty amazing from a storytelling standpoint that they can do that, especially unrehearsed and pretty conversationally.
A few months later, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation reported that a dead 175-pound bear was found among 40 open containers of cocaine, matching the packaging used by Thornton.
Oh, no, the bear OD.
That poor bear had OD'd on the cocaine and had presumably been thrown from the plane mid-flight because it was carrying too much weight. Wait, no, let me read that again. That poor bear had OD'd on the cocaine that had presumably been thrown from the plane mid-flight because it was carrying too much weight.
He's going down his checklist. He's like, cougar ants, check. Altimeter, check. A bear, check. Get the bear on this plane.
Pounds. A bear on cocaine. That poor bear.
Oh, that poor bear thought it was like powdered sugar. He's like, delicious cereal or
I
whatever.
see him like diving, doing a dive, a perfect dive.
And then he's walking around smoking and talking about
we should open a restaurant.
Oh my God.
A restaurant called Bear Essentials.
It's all honey. Oh my God. We got to get some bees in on this. Sticks his head in a beehive.
Anyway, their fans are called Murderinos. It is a complicated fandom that I'm not so sure about my consumption of that media. I feel like I'm questioning it all the time. And like I listen to My Favorite Murder, like old episodes as I fall asleep. Because I find it comforting. Like I find their banter comforting. But eventually, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and be like, and then they stuffed her body into a trunk. And like, this can't be good for me. Yeah. So I'll open it up for discussion now.
Well, I just have a follow-up question to that statement, Liz, which do you find your behavior affected by, like, after listening to it? Like, are you more cautious? Are you more like whatever?
Well, to an extent, and I'll tell you, like, I tend to believe that the world is not as dangerous as we think it is.
Right.
And I think statistically that's true. And I also know that I've encountered a lot of icky stuff and like dangerous stuff. And it has been helpful in some cases. Like one of the taglines of the podcast is F politeness. Because one of the things that you notice, especially in older stories, think about Ted Bundy, that a lot of women found themselves, not that it's their fault, but they found themselves in dangerous situations because they couldn't bear to be impolite or unkind to a strange man. And I was assaulted on a run. I'm fine. It wasn't that serious. Don't worry. But still, and it was exactly for that reason that I couldn't bear to not give someone directions when they stopped and asked me for directions, and then a situation unfolded. So there are aspects of self-defense that sort of come out of these stories, but then I'm also afraid that they create a worldview that's maybe more dangerous than it really is. Like, for example, children are not just kidnapped out of their front yard. Like, it's never been true that children have been kidnapped by strangers in any large number. And our entire generation of parents were not, I don't mean our parents, I mean us as parents, grew up in a culture that believed that they were, because of the few really famous child kidnappings. And that was just never true. And that belief has completely shaped our culture, the way that we parent, the way that kids grow up, the whole helicopter parent thing. So I can see that an increased attention to true crime could create a culture where we believe that the world is more dangerous than it really is.
Yeah, I think it's a greater awareness for my surroundings, whereas I would have just bopped through the world with my white privilege, like, nothing's going to happen to me, and I don't think it's now like, it's a street sense. It's like that radar is turned on for me in a way that it wasn't. Like, why unlock my car very far away from my car? I'm not going to do that anymore. Why unlock all the doors of my car? I don't need to do that. I can just unlock the driver's door, right? There's a reason why that's on my thing, right? I agree with Liz. I mean, I think that this has been something that I've had interest in from childhood, and it goes through peaks and valleys of interest. Like right now, I'm completely obsessed with another podcast. I haven't listened to this podcast in forever. But as someone who's gotten a letter on My Favorite Murder.
Yes, before. Betsy was read on My Favorite Murder.
Was read on My Favorite Murder. Yes, I was. But there I really said, they've wondered at times, like, do they have people in the clergy who listen to their show? And I really said that yes. And for me, it's about telling stories of marginalized people who are victim blamed and shamed for decades, and being able to say those stories and bring them into a new light and talk about them in a different way. That I think their storytelling abilities and the way they, and again, the growth in standing for justice, their change in use of language, right? That I now use the term sex worker. I don't use other terms, right? You start to do that work. And how do we give humanity and dignity to people who have found themselves on the absolute worst days of their lives and the last days of their lives? So
I got a few things.
Yeah. You go ahead. I have a couple of things too.
So it feels like it would really make me shrivel up. The people who watch the news and think that the world is so violent out there, and so, as you were saying, they change their behavior. They don't go out at night, or some of that's good. It's smart, but some of it is just like life constricting, and I'd almost rather not know about it. And the world is violent, but it's like the news. You only hear the bad stuff. And so I guess I wonder about that. And the other thing is, I've asked on this podcast like twice, and you all have answered, like, why is there such a thing about, like, women are really into it? You were saying it's like a thing. And I think one of you said before that it was something about, it's almost empowering in a way, because you get to see the story and see what happened, and you get that information for your behavior out in the world to protect yourself. And so I mean, I'm a guy, and I'm a scaredy cat and all that, but it's just different being a woman in the world, I'm sure, obviously.
Yeah, I think that that's true, that's a reason why these stories are so popular. And I also think that it's a way of aggrandizing the genre. Like it is true that 1 in 3 women will experience violent crime at some point in their life. It's also true that men are the victims of homicide way more than women are, like a lot more. So oftentimes with these podcasts, they are women's stories. It's women telling women's stories. So there is sort of a sorority aspect. And I don't mean that in like the collegiate way. I mean like in a deeper way of being in your community, kind of hearing your stories, whether or not they're stories that you actually identify with.
Betsy, if you got a letter read on this famous podcast, why is that not in our intro to our podcast? We should say the longest.
I put it on Instagram. Podcast. I put it on Instagram when it happened. I was like popping collar's own Betsy Carmody.
Nice.
Longest running Episcopal podcast. I'm going to add it to the list. And letter read on famous
featured,
much more
featured on
they called me Rev. I was Rev Betsy. I was one of the good Christians.
And she told a great story. So they also every other week they do what they call hometown stories, which are not about murder necessarily. They're just like kind of crazy stories, whether they're about crazy coincidences or crazy things that you found when you remodeled your house. And the story that Betsy told was a great story, which is why it was picked. And they loved it. It was really fun to hear them like freaking out over like, oh my God, this is so great. Yeah.
Unbelievable. I've got to listen to this now.
Same.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
But you're not more scared in life from listening to these?
No, I do think, like Betsy said, I think that there are places in my life where I need to take precautions to be safe. But those are not like I travel for work all the time in like pretty not great motels in really small towns. And when I travel,
we've already
alone,
determined your gold status or whatever.
My gold status.
Quality.
When I started this ministry, I was pretty brazen about that. Like I didn't think about coming and going, and like I just didn't. And I've heard enough of these stories. I know how someone can kill you in a motel room. So I do take, different precautions, and it hasn't saved my life yet, but I mean, it doesn't hurt me to do it. And it doesn't scare me to the point of distraction, but I do have some different resources about how to stay safe.
Okay.
Wow.
Good job, Liz.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Murderinos. Dickensians and Murderinos, and Betsy will give us our next group of people.
Nice.
So I thought about doing, but I couldn't really kind of zero in. Like I'm always fascinated when you watch like a rockumentary or whatever it is about a band or a like old celebrity, like how fan clubs like really started. It was some fan somewhere who was like, I'm president of the, Olivia de Havilland fan club. And like, this is how this is going to go down. Right. And there's suddenly all these letters and just the real kind of, peak of that before the internet kind of became involved. And, then being in a fan club is about getting a code so you can get the tickets early for some show or whatever, but like there used to be, you give away like, TLC's top fan is going to interview them on MTV, or whatever it is. Like there was this real kind of fans, Beatle fans. You think about the kind of like how all of that started, like original fan clubs for bands. And I always thought that was it felt like a much more, of course, authentic way to show fandom. So I'm actually going to mention a fandom that I have not yet really participated in. Like I haven't gone to things. I've looked up tickets to go, but I really found it during the pandemic. So I haven't quite crossed over yet, but that would be RuPaul's Drag Race.
I got my little shower cap.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's snow. Oh. Don't spit, just swallow it.
Are we living?
So you want to do hairography with the shower cap?
Of course.
That's an interesting choice.
But I feel like the shower cap, it's cute. It adds a little drama, a little variety.
You can imagine how gorgeous your hair would look with the fan blowing, right? But you want to wear a shower cap,
Absolutely.
And that's your choice, so let's do it.
So we discovered RuPaul's Drag Race during the pandemic. And of course I knew it was out there, but I knew that there were like umpteen seasons and there's all stars and there's all this stuff. But then once we started watching it, the storytelling on the show, the tongue-in-cheek on the show, the camp, but also the real stories of real people who have found drag as performance, drag as expression. They feel more fully themselves in the character that they've created, from comedy queens to, fishy queens to, all sorts of stuff in between. And my interest in how the performance actually happens, how the costuming works, the makeup works, the pieces, like it's been really awesome to kind of get to know this group of queens. Like I really, I haven't watched the HBO show. It's called We Are Here, where there are drag queens who go to visit towns and things like that. And small middle America has kind of a queer eye vibe to it. And it's also been interesting to watch the show evolve too, in terms of language and those sorts of things and how we have the conversation around, trans girls who are doing this, like how all this works. But I know there's Drag Con. I know that's a thing, right? They do it in LA, New York, and the UK. And they just had the UK one in January, earlier in January, the 6th and the 8th. But I would love to go and see some, like they'll tour with like a group of girls from the show. And it would be cool to like go do that. So we keep looking it up. We keep kind of being like, oh, we gotta go. But it is fascinating. Some of the challenges are to kind of do a workshop like you would do at DragCon. And so it's either doing a workshop about, body, about makeup, about wigs, about whatever it is. And these are all things I'm like, yeah, I'm really curious kind of how all of this works. I'm a fan. I follow people on Instagram. Sometimes we binge it a little too much. I have to take a break, but it's great.
Love it. I feel like RuPaul has been around like my whole life.
Yeah.
Like RuPaul has been a pop culture figure literally my whole life. So God bless her.
So yeah, a couple of things. First of all, my barber went to the RuPaul Drag Race show in Las Vegas. Review, right? RuPaul wasn't
Review,
there.
yes.
It was the show and some of the stars were on. He loved it. He said they were great. They were fabulous. And I guess he watches it enough to know some of the people who were on there that were contestants and such. I've never seen an episode. I have trouble with competition shows. I don't, that's another, I'm like a little baby. I can't do anything,
Can't handle it.
Anything where someone gets voted off the island or whatever, or even like sports. What if you love a team and they lose, like the big game, like the Super Bowl? It's awful. So anyway,
you don't want to see anyone sashay away. I understand.
I don't. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I don't know what drag is. I know that it's different than being transgender. At least in my mind, it's a very different thing. I think there's something empowering about it for some of the men who dress in drag. There's a way in which a part of them gets to shine where they don't maybe in their real lives, that maybe they're fabulous in regular life. But here they get to go to this nightclub, they get to go to this party, they get to be out in the world in a way that feels really kind of powerful and wonderful.
Well, and also I love when they get into conversations about religion, because there's always a wide amount of experience on the show, whether they're people who have been ostracized, people whose parents have made them try to go to conversion camps, that sort of thing, all the way to, I got my first taste of performing in the Black church. Like this is, I still go every week, I'm in my choir and then it's a whole nother thing. So that sort of spectrum too, like when we talk about how often people regularly going to church is erased from television, right? Or going to any sort of synagogue or mosque, to then have people like they're just putting on their makeup. So is that moment where they're just chatting and whatever before they're getting ready for a runaway. And it's like, oh yeah, well, my relationship with my mom and this is, what happened with my brother and, and those sorts of kind of personal stories. I think that again, I love the story, right? So that's kind of where I dig in.
What about you, Greg, as our resident straight man?
Oh, I don't know. I will say this. I am so with Liz. Like RuPaul feels like, it feels like RuPaul has been around for more than for longer than I've been alive. And I will say, the conversation around this has definitely changed, because there was an MTV, I want to say a Video Music Awards, or maybe it was an MTV Movie Awards, where they sent RuPaul out on stage with Milton Berle. And Milton Berle was making jokes about dressing up as a woman, and here he was with another guy dressed up as a woman, and RuPaul wasn't having any of it. And it was one of those awkward presentations that actually moved the ball forward on no, this isn't the same thing as this equivalency that you guys are making. This isn't what it is.
Well, and as RuPaul says, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anybody else? Can I get an amen every episode? And I'm just like, it's just so.
Well, I don't know who said it, but I hear it. I've heard it throughout my life. It's all drag. You're all wearing drag right now.
We're all performing drag all the time.
Presenting an identity. But the other thing I would say is there is a difference. I think, Greg, you were saying this. there's a difference between like frat boys, not to stereotype frat boys, dressing up in dresses and getting drunk and going out and dancing together. But even there, I think it probably lets out some part of themselves that they can't usually show. There's a difference between that and the other thing that I can't think of right now. And actual, guys
and art,
drag and feel and not just feel empowered, but also it's entertainment. It's a persona, and that is different. You were talking about Milton Berle. There is a way in which it's either it's parody or it's actually self-revealing in a way you maybe don't even know before you put that dress on. I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, that's I got to be honest. That's a world that I have never participated in, but I've always been shocked. Like every time I see like another season of RuPaul's Drag Race, I'm like, yeah, Lee, is that like the 50th season of RuPaul's Drag Race? Like
it's global, baby. It's everywhere.
Crazy.
Yeah. I mean, do you remember the RuPaul show? It was like a talk show.
Yes.
That was on like when I was in middle school. And I think that RuPaul is from Seattle. So I think that growing up, I saw RuPaul in drag and not in drag on like local TV shows and stuff like that.
You better work.
Oh,
I danced to that.
Right.
All right.
Well,
it's great.
I guess I'm gonna wrap us up. I wish I had like a backup prepared because mine is kind of a downer. No, I went with the dark side of fandom for mine. So maybe I should have switched mine to Betsy's. Maybe I'll do that.
You could do that in post production.
Yeah.
You just admitted that you stage all of this. So the bag is a farce. Just want to make note of that.
Yeah, it would have been a switch just for this time. Right. So I used to play video games a lot. I would say so. Our podcast is about 10 years old, and that's about when I stopped playing video games. Like I would play them like all the way through seminary. Betsy would come down to my apartment. And,
I come down when Ruby was napping, and I'd watch you play Resident Evil, and I'd be like, "Have you gone over there? Go over there." I just enjoyed watching you play.
Exactly. So I imagine it's so funny because I think all the time about how the fact that we don't really talk about gaming on this podcast a lot, and a lot of it is because none of us really play games or anything like that. But it is a big part of pop culture. And I was thinking that, probably the last game that I was really into and played a lot was a game that Naughty Dog put out about 10 years ago called The Last of Us. And the reason that it's on my mind is because there's a TV show. They made it into a TV show. Just premiered. Yeah.
No spoilers, please, because I haven't started watching yet.
Yeah. So
I haven't started watching it either.
So that's what I was going to say is like, this is one of those awkward spots where the game's been out for 10 years. And my personal taste is to say, if something's been around for 10 years, like how are there spoilers? But because it's a television show, I totally get it. So I'm not doing any spoilers for The Last of Us, for either the first Last of Us or the second Last of Us, The Last of Us Part 2, which is what I'm going to talk about.
There's 2 of them? Greg, spoiler. Come on.
Okay. No.
I'm just kidding.
There are 2 video games?
Yeah. So The Last of Us came out in like 2013. And then The Last of Us Part 2 came out, I don't know, like 2020, I guess. Like maybe, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But when The Last of Us 2 was announced, there was a lot of excitement because the first game was very popular and people really liked it. And they liked the storyline of it. And it was basically like playing a movie. It's no secret as to why it was turned into a TV show because it was very cinematic when you were playing it the first time. So when The Last of Us 2 was announced, people got very excited about it until items were leaked about the storyline. And in those leaks, the fans of The Last of Us, or some of the fans of The Last of Us, I guess I should say, became very upset because they felt like the game was being taken away from them. and that they were being forced to play something that they didn't want to play. And part of the big secret of that is that fans thought that they were going to have to play the game as either a gay character or a trans character. And this was like a big hubbub around before The Last of Us was even released, before part 2 was even released. And so what ended up happening was that before the game was released, fans of the game series were going on to rating sites, to review sites, and posting 0 rating reviews of the game before it came out. And even if you go to a site like Metacritic now, what you'll see is that the critics score is like somewhere like 9.3 out of 10 or something like that. And the user score is somewhere around 5, which is way up from what it used to be. It used to be at like 2.5 or 2.2. And it's this idea of like, there was this component, this online component, who just blitzed like ratings boards and giving bad ratings, which is something that's been happening in fandom a lot lately, especially around stuff that appeals to, as Ricardo says, like these straight white guys who sort of feel entitled to an experience that's geared towards them.
Because so few experiences are.
I know, right?
Right.
Yeah. So this is similar to like the what was it, the Star Wars movie that came out that everybody hated, and it just got flamed on IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes with like bad scores and stuff like that. And it's part of me is thinking, okay, well, this is really silly, because ultimately what we're talking about are like crybabies who are just putting 0 stars on internet sites that, like, who cares? But there's also a part of it that's like, it feels like there's an energy that gets behind, like there's something that gets fostered or like there's something festering in these people that then is given energy, and it creates something really sort of dark and angry and bad in the world. Right? Like somehow that energy that they have about that video game turns into something horrible, like in reality. Not going into spoilers for The Last of Us Part 2, most of the concerns that people had about that game just weren't true. And then other parts that, were slightly true about what it was that they were saying, it's the characters of the game, right? Like it's the story being told in the game. So I think that the problem is that video games require you to do something, which is that you control the characters. So there's sort of this mapping that happens, right? Where it's like your brain and your muscles are making something happen on the screen. Therefore, the thing on the screen is you. And if the thing on the screen is a lesbian woman, then that's not you, and you get angry. Right. And that was kind of like what was happening with the fans of this game. And it became something that became really ugly.
Did men feel that way playing Tomb Raider, though?
Well, again, right. Like Tomb Raider was a sexualized female body, right, that they could sort of manipulate and do whatever. And yeah, she was a badass, like shooting guns and stuff like that, but it was something that was titillating to men to play, right?
So they didn't need to have an identification of self.
Right. I would say that's true. Yeah. I don't know. I know that like gaming culture has really gotten out of hand over the last 10 years. I'm actually really glad that I'm out of it. Because I think that there is a nastiness to it and a messiness to it. I know that Gamergate, which I don't know a whole lot about, but I know that that was something that happened recently. And I just think that's sad. Like that feels really sad to me. And I don't know how fandom gets to that point where it goes from like, I love this. This is like my Dickens universe to, I can't believe they did Tale of Two Cities. I'm never coming back to Dickens universe again. It's like that's kind of how it works. And it's like I just don't get it. I don't understand like how you can map your personality onto something so much that if it does something that you don't want it to, the sky is falling.
I know like nothing about gaming. I've never been a gamer. Right now, I'm reading a terrific book that I would recommend to anybody. You might like it, Greg, called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, which is the story of so far, I'm like a third of the way through the creation of a video game. And it's been in the 90s. And it's been so enlightening to like learn about not just the technical, it's a novel, not just the technical aspects of how you do that, but like the art and the storytelling and like the decisions you make about what kind of story you want to tell. But I wonder if in the gaming world, like maybe one of the changes from Mario to like where we are right now, I'm sure that there were always people, even with Mario, who were like, I could play this all day long. And maybe they did. But it feels like now the sophistication of the games, the identification of like point of view and the graphics is so absorbing. There does seem to be an addictive quality for some people who live there. Like years ago, the guy in the apartment above me could play video games loudly for 8 and 10 hours a day, nonstop. I mean, it was non-stop. And it was like a little scary. He was in the military and then he came home and played shooter games like literally all day long. Like, did that happen with Donkey Kong? It might have. There were probably some kids who did that with Donkey Kong.
Yeah, we talk about the technology we have creating community, right? And networking and playing with people all over the world and being on a team with them and doing whatever you're doing. But, you know, the technology we have, if you hate something, oh man, nothing creates a community like hate does, right? We just had a guest on campus who would talk about that like the technology we have is awesome. But that at the same time, you know, you want to be pissed off about something and hate something let's all hate it together. And so this is another example of like, let's go. And then how can we infiltrate it at all levels from not just message boards and not just groups, but to the actual ratings of the game and like all of that sort of thing. Like, look at the power that we have.
You're so right, Betsy. And I think the thing that brought it to my mind is that there's some of this that I kind of see in church discourse around like rectors that leave a parish. And I'm not saying anything about the spot that I'm in right now. Okay. I'm not saying anything about that. But I've worked in a lot of Episcopal churches. I've worked in a lot of churches just all over, Episcopal or whatever. And ultimately, like whatever happens, like whenever like a priest or a pastor or whatever leaves a church, they're either like a beloved saint or they're like the spawn of Satan, right? And there's like nothing in between. There's like no idea that this person did the best they could. They did all right in some things and they messed up in other things. That's never the discourse that I experience in churches. It's either they were the absolute worst fit or they were the best thing since sliced bread and we're never going to replace that person. And that's kind of the mentality that it feels like.
And it changed. That dynamic changes over time. Like a lot of what I do is history taking with parishes, like in the transition process. And without a doubt, 2 rectors ago was beloved. But when he or she was 1 rector ago, they weren't. And it's amazing how the passage of time and nostalgia and the inevitable decline of the institution, like it just skips a rector. The beloved rector position just skips a rector. So if you leave a place and it bums you out you won't know is the beauty of it, but it bums you out to know that people might be talking negatively about your tenure after you leave. Just wait 7 years, 5 years, and you'll be the beloved rector.
You're good to go. Yeah. So I've got like 3 things to say. And the first one is you started making this connection with church and the gaming stuff. And I was like, what is the connection here? But then it hit me because the word that came up for me when you were talking about these gamers being angry about the lesbian woman character they had to play was betrayal.
Right.
They felt betrayed. This is my world and you're making me do something that is not my thing. And that's exactly what can happen when a rector leaves, a sense of betrayal. Why are they leaving? Did we not make them happy? Or betrayal. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's not always betrayal, but there is that sense of like they took something that I had established some affection and energy for, this church community, this gaming world was something that fed me. And I had expectations of it that it did not meet. And now I am betrayed and I'm going to lash out. So that's a great connection you made there. If that's what you were doing with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a similar energy was kind of, that's all.
The other thing is, I don't even remember what the context was, but I'm not a gamer either. But there was some game or something online where I had to pick a character to do a thing. And you can cut this out of the podcast if you want. I always pick like the muscle-bound guy, the big, powerful guy. And it feels good. It feels like, I'm the muscle guy. And there's there's like the woman and there's like the thin guy so I'm always going for the muscle guy. So I'm thinking, I wonder if that's hard for these people who it's probably a bit of fantasy fulfillment or something, the way that, in my opinion, things like sports are. And, you admire other, I'll just stick with the straight male admiring other men. And it's a safe way to do that, maybe. And so these young men playing the gamer games that don't get their muscle man character or their really kind of handsome guy, because they're maybe not those things, get really angry. The third thing is, you think there's not flame wars in the Dickens universe. Let me tell you. Oh man, there was one.
Get ready.
So what they do is at the end of the Dickens universe, at the end where the dance happens on Friday night, they announce next year's book. And one of the threads throughout the week is, what do you think it's going to be? What do you think it's going to be? Well, one year they decided to not do a Dickens book at all. They chose George Eliot's Middlemarch for the next year.
No.
I know.
What?
And I have to tell you, some people literally started crying. They started crying and weeping. And some people were like, yeah. And I spoke to this woman who'd been crying, and I was like, are you okay? And she said, I only have so many years left in me, and I wanted to do all the Dickens books here. And now I have to miss this one. And she was crying.
My pastoral care.
Oh, I know. And so, well, anyway, so that happened. And, however, it was a great year. I went, I loved it. Never would have read it otherwise. And it brought some people in who were George Eliot fans who now come to Dickens universe. So I don't know, just to say.
That preaches. That story preaches.
Wow.
Agreed.
Wow.
I'm going to preach that the next time that I have to do like a welcoming your new rector sermon or something. It's because it's about change and it's the unexpected. And I think that in addition to betrayal in those circumstances, there's also just a ton of fear. Like, what does it mean if these things that I hold dear are changing so much? Yeah. So that's a great little parable.
I only have so many years left at this church, and this is who they picked to be the rector.
Yep, who's gonna bury me?
Right.
Did she go to the Dickens Universe website and give them 0 stars?
Oh, there we go.
This isn't my Dickens universe.
No, but she was pretty vocal about it. And then she came back the next year, and all seemed to be well. She seemed a little angry the first couple of days, but then she settled it. So, Greg, what happened? So, is that game? It wasn't as popular. Part 2, then?
Oh, Last of Us Part 2 is a masterpiece. It's beautiful and lovely, and the storytelling is just extremely well done. And
said I walk beside the still waters, and they restore my soul, but I can't walk on the path of the right because I'm wrong. No, I can't walk on the path of the right because I'm wrong.
What are you doing, kiddo? You really gonna go through with this?
I'm gonna find. And I'm gonna kill. Every last one of them.
But like the problem with fandom sometimes is that it's too much. Like your personality can't be a video game. I'm sorry. Just can't. And I mean, I love this show. We've been doing this show for 10 years, but my personality isn't popping collars. It's a hobby, right? And I hope it's a hobby for you guys. It's like
It's my whole life, Greg. This is all that I have.
Don't take it away from me.
I don't know how to be off of this podcast. This is how I express myself.
You'll find it. If you cancel this.
0 stars.
0
stars.
Oh, rate 0 stars just at the thought of it.
They made fun of me for listening to this podcast. 0 stars.
0 stars.
All right. Wow. I have to say that was one of the most diverse.
That was great.
Yes.
Ever done.
And a great
we were all over the
19th century
moment.
books, a TV show, podcast, and gamer.
Yeah. Okay, that's it. Another episode of Popping Collars in the books. Thanks for listening. You can support your favorite Episcopal podcast by buying our merch. Just go to poppingcollarspodcast.com. Click the little tab at the top that says Popping Collars merch and more. And you will find our store full of fabulous items like shirts, stickers, dog blankets, wall art, whatever you want with the Popping Collars logo, you should be able to find.
Dog blankets.
Yeah, dog blankets.
What?
I know what my friends are getting for Christmas.
You can also find us hanging out in the closed cafe of episcopaljournal.org. We love them. You will too. Check them out for all your Episcopal news and journaling needs. And with that, that is Popping Collars for this time. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Betsy. We'll see you next time, and
keep those collars popped.
Pop, pop. Yay.
By the way, did you buy merch, Ricardo?
I did. I got 3 stickers.
It doesn't it doesn't tell me who buys stuff, but it says like the destination for this purchase is California. I was like, oh, that sounds like Ricardo.
Popping Collars merch. I'm looking at it right now.
Can't wait. I can't wait for my dark heather t-shirt. I hope it's all cotton. I have a feeling it's not.
Ooh, nice like coffee. Ooh, a hoodie.
Oh, I didn't see the hoodie.
Ooh, and a tote bag.
Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell on this earth forevermore. Said I walk beside the still waters and they restore my soul, but I can't walk on the path of the right because I'm